Hello, my good friends. How are you today? God bless you all. Picture this. It's a stormy night in Detroit. The rain is pouring down, and a lone waitress sees a child shivering in a wheelchair outside her diner. She doesn't know it yet, but that small act of kindness is about to drag her into a world of billionaires, betrayal, and secrets that could topple empires. Who's watching from the shadows? And what happens when trust is broken? Buckle up, folks. This is the story of Jess Harper, and it's going to hit you right in the gut. Comment where you're watching and subscribe to join the channel. The rain came down hard that night, a relentless drumbeat against the tin roof of May's Pit Stop, a little roadside diner on the outskirts of Detroit. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of grilled cheese sizzling on the flat top and the bitter tang of coffee brewing in a pot that had seen better days. The neon sign out front flickered, casting a weak pink glow onto the slick pavement where puddles reflected the light like shattered mirrors. It was a slow shift, slower than usual for a Friday. Just a handful of regulars lingered, a trucker hunched over his fourth mug of black coffee, a grizzled old guy flipping through a soggy copy of the Free Press, and a couple of community college kids buried in textbooks at the back booth whispering about calculus like it was a secret code. Jess Harper leaned against the counter, wiping it down with a rag that had gone gray from overuse. Her sneakers squeaked against the linoleum, her feet throbbing after 12 hours on the clock. At 30, she wasn't living the dream. Minimum wage, a stack of bills that never seemed to shrink, and a studio apartment with a leaky faucet she couldn't afford to fix. But it was her life, carved out of late nights and stubborn grit, and she'd learned to wear it like a badge. She wasn't the type to give up, not on herself, and sure as hell not on anyone else. She was reaching for a fresh towel under the counter when something caught her eye through the rain-streaked window. Out there, huddled against the diner's brick wall, was a kid, a boy, maybe 10 or 11, sitting motionless in a wheelchair. His frail frame was swallowed by an oversized jacket, threadbare and soaked through, the hood drooping over his face. Dark hair plastered to his forehead, dripping water into his eyes. Even through the fogged-up glass, Jess could see the way he stared down the empty street, wide-eyed, lost, like he was waiting for a ghost. "Hell no," Jess muttered under her breath. She didn't think twice. Grabbing a dry towel from the stack, she shoved the diner door open, wincing as a gust of wind slapped icy rain across her cheeks. The cold bit into her bones, but she ignored it, crouching down beside the kid. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, keeping her voice soft so it wouldn't get drowned out by the storm. "You okay out here?" The boy's head jerked up, startled, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair so tight his knuckles went white. I'm waiting," he stammered, his voice small, barely a whisper over the rain. His eyes darted past her, scanning the street again, and Jess's chest tightened. She followed his gaze. Nothing but wet asphalt, parked cars glinting under the streetlights, and the occasional splash of headlights cutting through the dark. Whoever he was waiting for wasn't coming. "You're freezing, kiddo," she said, shaking out the towel and draping it over his shoulders. His jacket was so wet it squelched under her fingers, and up close she could see how thin he was, how his lips were tinged blue. "Come on, let's get you inside. It's warm, and I make a mean grilled cheese. You like that?" For a second, he hesitated, his eyes flickering with that guarded look kids get when they've learned not to trust too easy. Jess got it. She'd been there herself, back when life taught her the hard way that kindness usually came with strings. But then he nodded, just a tiny dip of his chin, and that was enough. She stood, brushing wet hair out of her face, and took the handles of his wheelchair. The wheels squeaked as she guided him up the ramp and into the diner, the bell above the door jingling like a weak applause. Inside, the warmth hit like a hug. Jess parked him near the counter, grabbed a spare blanket from the lost and found box, somebody's ugly Christmas knit, and tucked it around his legs. "There you go," she said, flashing him a grin. "Now, what's your name, buddy?" "Noah," he mumbled, pulling the towel tighter around himself. His voice was still shaky, but his eyes softened a little, like he was thawing out. "Noah, huh? Cool name. I'm Jess." She slid behind the counter, flipping a slice of bread onto the griddle with a sizzle. "So, Noah, what's your deal? You into video games, comics, what? He blinked, like he wasn't used to being asked. Books, he said after a beat. I like pirate stories. Pirates? Oh, you're my kind of guy, Jess laughed, spreading butter on the bread. Ever read Treasure Island? That Jim Hawkins kid's a badass. Noah's lips twitched, almost a smile, and Jess felt a little spark of victory. She poured him a mug of hot cocoa, sliding it across the counter. Here, warm your hands up. As Noah cupped the mug, his fingers trembling less now, Jess didn't notice the sleek black SUV parked across the street. Its windshield wipers swept back and forth in a slow, hypnotic rhythm, cutting through the rain. Inside, Victor Grayson sat in the back seat, his sharp gray eyes locked on the diner's window. CEO of Grayson Tech, one of the biggest players in the Midwest's tech game, he wasn't a man who got surprised often. But tonight was different. He'd been on the phone with his security team an hour ago, barking orders after they'd tracked down his son. His only son, Noah, who'd gone missing after a therapy session downtown. The caregiver swore he'd only turned his back for a minute, but a minute was all it took. And now here Noah was, sitting in some rundown diner, eating a sandwich made by a woman who didn't even know whose kid she was feeding. Victor leaned back into the plush leather seat, his fingers tapping the armrest, a rare fidget from a man who built his empire on control. Through the glass, he watched Jess move with an easy kind of grace, her hand steady as she set a plate in front of Noah, tucking a napkin into his lap like it was the most natural thing in the world. She didn't hesitate, didn't ask questions, just helped. It hit him like a punch, pure, no-strings kindness. He hadn't seen that in years, not in boardrooms full of suits chasing his money, not in the politicians kissing his ass for favors. Who is she? He muttered, more to himself than anyone else. His phone buzzed and he answered without looking. Talk. Sir, we've got her info, came the clipped voice of Lydia Pierce, his assistant. Always efficient, always ahead of him. Jessica Harper, 30, works full-time at May's Pit Stop. No record, no big assets, barely getting by. Born and raised in Detroit, parents gone, no family. Victor's jaw tightened as he listened, his eyes still on Jess. A nobody, on paper. But tonight, she'd been everything. I want to meet her, he said finally. Set it up. Lydia paused just a second. You sure, sir? I'm sure. He cut her off, his tone flat. But dig deeper. Nobody does something for nothing. Back in the diner, Jess glanced out the window as she wiped her hands on her apron. That SUV was still there, its dark shape looming like a shadow that wouldn't budge. A chill ran down her spine, not from the cold but from the feeling she couldn't shake, like she was being watched. Weird, she muttered, brushing it off. She turned back to Noah, who was nibbling his sandwich, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. Whatever was out there, it could wait. Right now, this kid needed her. The next morning, Jess stood outside May's, rubbing her arms against the crisp October air. The rain had stopped, leaving the city slick and shining under a watery sun. She'd usually be tying on her apron by now, starting another grind, but that SUV was back. 20 minutes it had been sitting there, tinted windows hiding whoever was inside. Her gut twisted. She'd lived long enough to know when something was up. The back door opened, and a woman stepped out. Tall, sharp-featured, dressed in a gray suit that screamed money. She walked over with a clipped stride, stopping a few feet away. Jessica Harper? Jess nodded, wary. Yeah, who's asking? Lydia Pierce. I work for Victor Grayson. She held out a crisp envelope. He'd like to meet you. The car's ready. Jess blinked, then laughed, a short, dry sound. What, like now? Nah, I've got a shift. Lydia didn't flinch. This'll cover it. Inside the envelope was a check, more than a week's pay. Jess's breath hitched, but her instinct screamed, nope. Look, I don't know what this is, but I'm not hopping in some stranger's car. Fair, Lydia said, unfazed. Think it over. He'll be in touch. She turned back to the SUV, leaving Jess standing there, the check heavy in her hand. Noah's face flashed in her mind, those big, uncertain eyes. Whatever this was, it started with him. And that was enough to make her wonder. Hey, If you're hooked on Jess's story and dying to know if she takes the leap into Victor's world, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment with your guess. What's she walking into? Let's find out together. Jess Harper wasn't sure what she'd expected when she climbed into that sleek black SUV, but it sure as hell wasn't this. The ride into downtown Detroit felt like crossing into another dimension, past the rusted-out factories and potholed streets of her world, straight into a canyon of glass and steel. Grayson Tech's headquarters loomed ahead, a shiny monolith that screamed money, power, and everything Jess had never belonged to. She tugged at the frayed hem of her jacket, feeling like a stray dog wandering into a penthouse. Lydia Pierce led her through the lobby, all marble floors and hushed voices, where men and women in crisp suits moved like they owned the air itself. Jess stuck out like a sore thumb, faded jeans, scuffed sneakers, hair still damp from last night's rain. She caught a few sideways glances, the kind that sized her up and found her wanting. Her stomach churned, but she squared her shoulders. If they wanted to stare, let 'em. She wasn't here to impress anybody. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent, the ding at the end sounding like a gunshot in her ears. Lydia ushered her into an office bigger than May's entire diner, with floor-to-ceiling windows showing off the Detroit skyline like a postcard. Behind a desk that looked carved from midnight sat Victor Grayson himself. Salt and pepper hair swept back, suit sharp enough to cut glass, and eyes that pinned her in place. Cool, unreadable, like he was dissecting her soul. "Miss Harper," he said, voice smooth as gravel. "Take a seat." Jess hesitated, then dropped into the chair across from him, her back stiff. "So, what's this about? You gonna tell me why a guy like you cares what a waitress does?" Victor leaned back, steepling his fingers. "I saw what you did for Noah last night. You didn't know who he was, didn't ask for anything. You just helped. That's rare." She shrugged, brushing it off. "Kid was cold and alone. Anybody would have done it." "No," he said, his gaze sharpening. "They wouldn't." He slid a folder across the desk but didn't open it. "I want to offer you a job, personal assistant. I need someone who gets people, not just numbers." Jess blinked, then let out a short, humorless laugh. "You serious? You think a chick slinging coffee fits in a place like this?" "I think you've got something most people here don't," Victor said, unfazed. "Heart." She crossed her arms, leaning forward. "And what's the catch? Guys like you don't hand out golden tickets without wanting something back." Victor's lips twitched, the ghost of a smirk. "No catch, just a job. Pays better than the diner, and I figure you could use it." He wasn't wrong. The check from Lydia was still burning a hole in her pocket, and the thought of knocking out some bills or fixing that damn faucet made her waver. But this was nuts. Still, those eyes of Noah's kept tugging at her, and curiosity got the better of her. "Fine," she said, exhaling hard. "I'll give it a shot. But if this turns into some corporate BS, I'm out." "Deal," Victor said, and that was that. Her first week at Grayson Tech was like drowning in a sea of suits and jargon she didn't understand. The office buzzed with a clipped, urgent energy, people barking about Q4 projections and synergy like it was a secret language. Jess felt like an imposter, fumbling through emails and tripping over her own feet. The other assistants barely looked at her, and the execs treated her like furniture. She overheard whispers in the break room one afternoon, sharp and cutting. "She's just some diner chick. What's she got on Grayson to land this gig?" Another voice snickered. "Bet she's gone in a month." Jess clenched her fists, biting back the urge to snap. "Let 'em talk!" She'd survived worse than a bunch of pencil pushers with attitude, but the doubt crept in anyway, gnawing at her edges. What was she doing here? Her first real test came on day 3. Victor dropped a brick of a file on her desk, all legal mumbo-jumbo about a multi-million-dollar deal with some auto supplier. "Read it," he said, cool as ice. "I want your take by tomorrow." She stared at him, dumbfounded. "You kidding me? I don't know squat about contracts." "Then learn," he shot back, already turning away. "Or don't. Up to you." Jess wanted to chuck the file at his head. Instead, she hauled it home to her cramped apartment, spread it out on her wobbly kitchen table, and powered through the night on stale coffee and sheer spite. Her eyes burned, her head throbbed, but by sunrise she'd scratched out a report, rough, sure, but hers. She marched into Victor's office that morning, tossed it on his desk, and braced herself. He read it in silence, 5 minutes that stretched into forever. Finally, he leaned back. "You missed some key risks," he said, voice neutral. "But your angle on the supplier's weak spots? Not bad. Rewrite it. Make it sharper." "Not bad?" Jess snapped, exhaustion fraying her nerves. "I stayed up all night for not bad? How long you gonna test me like this?" Victor met her glare, unflinching. "As long as it takes. I don't keep dead weight." She swallowed a retort, grabbed the file, and stormed out. She could do this. She would do this. But man, did she hate him a little right then. That night her phone buzzed while she was heating up leftovers. Noah's name popped up on the screen. She'd given him her number after he'd shyly asked if they could talk books again. "Hey, Jess?" His voice was bright, excited. "I started that pirate book you told me about. Jim's cool, like you said." Jess grinned, leaning against the counter as the microwave hummed. "Told you, kiddo? What's your favorite part so far?" "When he sneaks onto the ship," Noah said. "It's like he's brave even when he's scared." "Oh, and Jess, I'm glad you're here. Nobody talks to me like you do." Her throat tightened, and she closed her eyes for a second. "Yeah, well, you're pretty cool yourself, Noah." That was it. That was why she hadn't bolted yet. Not the paycheck, not Victor's fancy promises, this kid. But the warm, fuzzy feeling didn't last. The next morning, Victor called her into his office, his face darker than usual. He slid a thick folder across the desk, his voice low and tight. "You talked to Jack Ramsey from NovaCorp last week. Now they've got our playbook. Explain." Jess froze, her pulse hammering. "Jack? What the? Yeah, he's a guy who used to tip me at May's. Recognized me outside the diner last week, asked about my new job. That's it." Victor's eyes didn't budge. He's their lead negotiator, and now they've got intel that could tank us. Convenient timing, don't you think? Her stomach dropped. "You think I sold you out? For what, a couple bucks from a guy who liked my coffee?" Her voice rose, sharp and trembling. "I'm not that person, Victor." He leaned back, rubbing his temples. "I don't know what you are yet." That did it. Something snapped inside her, anger, hurt, all of it boiling over. "Then figure it out, 'cause I'm done proving myself to you." She spun on her heel and stormed out, the door slamming behind her. The hallway blurred as her eyes stung, but she blinked it back. She wasn't crying over this. No way. Outside, the rain had started again, a cold drizzle soaking through her jacket as she stood on the sidewalk. Victor didn't trust her. Fine. She'd clear her name herself. She'd survived too much to let some rich jerk pin this on her. Up in his office, Victor watched her through the window, his jaw tight. For the first time in years, a crack of doubt split through his certainty. Had he gotten her wrong? Jess is pissed, and Victor's on edge. Will she fight back or walk away? Hit subscribe and drop a comment with your take. What's her next move? Stick around to find out. Jess Harper didn't sleep that night. The rain kept pounding her apartment window, a steady thrum that matched the churn in her gut. Victor's words echoed in her head. "I don't know what you are yet." Like a slap she couldn't shake off. She'd poured everything into proving herself, and he still saw her as the fall guy. Fine. If he wouldn't dig for the truth, she would. She wasn't about to let some corporate suit ruin her over a lie. The next 2 days, Jess turned into a ghost around Grayson Tech. She kept her head down, ears open, watching the way people moved, the way they talked, or didn't. The whispers hadn't stopped. Sharp little jabs about her being the leak, the diner girl who got too close. But she started noticing patterns. People clammed up when certain names came up, and one kept buzzing in the background. Miles Donovan. Senior exec, slick as oil, always hovering near Victor with that fake smile. Jess didn't trust guys like him. Never had. And the more she listened, the more she caught him steering conversations away from the NovaCorp mess. Too eager to point fingers at her, too quick to change the subject. Friday night rolled in with another storm, the kind Detroit knew too well, wind howling, rain slashing sideways, turning the streets into rivers. Grayson Tech's offices were mostly empty by 8, just a skeleton crew and the hum of fluorescent lights. Jess slipped back in after hours, her heart thudding against her ribs. She'd swiped a spare key card from the break room earlier, dropped by some careless assistant, and now she was banking on it to get her into Miles's office. Security was light, but if she got caught, she'd be toast. Didn't matter. She'd survived shadier corners than this. The hallway was dead quiet, her wet sneakers squeaking on the marble floor. Miles's office was locked, but Jess had grown up in a neighborhood where locks were more suggestion than rule. She fished a hairpin from her pocket, old habit, and jimmied the door open with a soft click. Inside, the air smelled like leather and expensive cologne, the desk littered with papers and a fancy pen that probably cost more than her rent. She booted up his computer, her hands shaking as she typed. Password? Took her 3 tries. Grayson won, too obvious for a guy like him, but she was in. Minutes dragged like hours. Files loaded, emails popped up, and then she hit gold. A thread with Jack Ramsey from NovaCorp. Dates, numbers, a whole damn trail of Grayson tech secrets handed over like candy. And there, buried in the chain, a draft memo pinning it all on her. Jessica Harper, recent hire, likely compromised. Jess's blood turned to ice. That bastard had set her up from the start. She snapped photos with her phone, the screen's glow lighting up her face in the dark. She was about to shut it down when a shadow fell across the desk. You shouldn't be here, Harper. Jess spun around, heart slamming into her throat. Miles Donovan stood in the doorway, his suit rumpled, eyes narrow and mean. He stepped inside, closing the door with a slow, deliberate thud. What the hell do you think you're doing? She straightened, shoving her phone behind her back. Funny, I was going to ask you the same thing. I've got everything, Miles. The emails, the deal with NovaCorp. You're done. His lip curled and he lunged, faster than she'd expected, grabbing for her arm. Jess twisted away, but he caught her wrist, yanking hard. The phone clattered to the floor, and she stumbled, crashing into the desk. Pain shot through her hip, but she gritted her teeth, kicking at his shin. He cursed, loosening his grip just enough for her to break free. She dove for the phone, fingers closing around it as he came at her again. Give it to me, you little... Miles snarled, but Jess was already moving, bolting for the door. He grabbed her jacket, pulling her back, and she swung an elbow wild, catching him in the jaw. He staggered, and she yanked free, sprinting into the hall. Her lungs burned, footsteps echoing as she tore toward the stairwell, rain roaring outside like it was cheering her on. She didn't stop until she was 3 floors down, hiding in a supply closet, panting and clutching her phone like a lifeline. The photos were still there. She had him. Monday morning, Jess didn't wait for an invitation. She stormed into Victor Grayson's office, past Lydia's startled, "You can't just shh," and slammed her phone on his desk. The screen glowed with Miles's emails, undeniable proof. "Look at it," she said, voice sharp and trembling. "Miles sold you out, not me. He's been playing you, and he tried to pin it on the diner chick because I'm an easy target, right?" Victor's eyes flicked to the phone, then up to her. He picked it up, scrolling in silence, his face unreadable. 5 agonizing minutes passed, the only sound the faint tick of a clock on the wall. Finally, he set it down, his jaw clenching so tight a muscle twitched. "This is real?" Jess crossed her arms, glaring. "You tell me, boss. I didn't risk my neck for fake screenshots." He exhaled slow, running a hand through his hair. First time she'd seen him look anything less than stone cold. "I was wrong," he said, voice low, almost soft. "About you." "Yeah, damn right you were," Jess shot back, her anger still simmering. "I busted my ass for you, Victor. Took your crap, stayed up nights, and you still thought I'd stab you in the back. Over what? A guy I used to pour coffee for?" Victor leaned forward, his gray eyes locking on hers. "I've spent 20 years building this place, Jess. Everyone wants a piece, money, power, something. When Noah went missing, He stopped, swallowing hard. "I stopped trusting anything good, but you made me question that." Her breath caught. That was the closest he'd come to human since she'd met him. She wanted to stay mad, to tell him where he could shove his excuses, but something in his voice, a crack of real, made her pause. "Then fix it," she said finally. "You want to keep me around? Start acting like you mean it." He nodded, just once. "I will." Later that day, word spread like wildfire. Miles Donovan was out. Security escorted him from the building, his face red and sputtering, while the office buzzed with shock. Jess kept her distance, dodging the stares and murmurs. She wasn't ready to celebrate, not yet. She was still figuring out if she even wanted to stay in this snake pit. Her phone buzzed as she grabbed her coat to leave. Noah again. "Hey, Jess." His voice was all sunshine, cutting through the gray of her day. "I drew something for you. It's you as a pirate captain. Want to see?" Jess smiled, the knot in her chest loosening. "Yeah, kiddo, I'd love that. Tell me about it." She leaned against the wall, listening as he rambled about her ship and her sword. His laugh bright and easy. This was why she'd fought. Not for Victor, not for Grayson Tech, but for a kid who saw her when nobody else did. She stepped outside, the storm finally easing into a drizzle. The air smelled clean, like a fresh start. Maybe she wasn't done here after all. Jess took down the bad guy, but will she forgive Victor? What's next for her and Noah? Smash that subscribe button and leave a comment with your thoughts. We're not done yet. The fallout from Miles Donovan's exit hit Grayson Tech like a shockwave. By Tuesday, the boardroom was a buzz of hushed voices and tight-lipped execs, all scrambling to save face after the NovaCorp leak. Jess Harper watched it from the sidelines, leaning against a window in the break room, her arms crossed. The whispers had shifted. No more diner chick jabs, just awkward nods and quick glances. She'd proven them wrong, every last one, but it didn't feel like a win. Not yet. She was still waiting for something, though she couldn't quite name it. Victor Grayson found her there that afternoon, his usual polished armor traded for a rare hint of fatigue, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. He didn't waste time with small talk. "Jess," he said, voice steady but quieter than she'd ever heard it. "I owe you more than an apology." She turned, meeting his gaze. "Yeah, you do, but I'm not here for sorries, Victor. What's this about?" He stepped closer, hands in his pockets, a move that made him look almost human. "I misjudged you. Badly. And I don't do that often." He paused like the next part was hard to get out. "I want you to stay. Not as my assistant. Something bigger. Ethics advisor. Someone to keep this place honest." Jess blinked, then laughed. A real belly-deep sound that echoed off the glass. "You're kidding, right? Me? In a room full of suits who still think I'm a nobody?" "That's exactly why," Victor said, his eyes locking on hers. "They were wrong about you. I was wrong. You see people, really see them, in a way nobody here does. We need that." She studied him, searching for the catch. This wasn't the cold CEO she'd met weeks ago, the guy who'd sized her up like a chess piece. This was a man who'd been rattled, maybe even humbled. Still, she wasn't sold. "If I stay," she said, voice firm, "things change around here. For real. No more blind trust in the big shots while the little guys get screwed. You want me on board, you prove it's not just talk." Victor's lips twitched. Closest thing to a smile she'd ever seen from him. "Done. You set the terms." She narrowed her eyes, half expecting him to back off. But he didn't. He just stood there, waiting, like he meant it. "All right," she said finally, exhaling slow. "1 week. I'll think it over. No pressure, like you said." "Take your time," he replied, and for once, she believed him. Friday afternoon, Jess ditched the office for Outer Drive Park, a scrappy little patch of green on Detroit's east side. The rain had finally cleared out, leaving the sky a soft blue streaked with gold as the sun dipped low. She sat on a bench, her thrift store jacket swapped for a new one, still cheap but warm, watching kids chase each other across the grass, their shouts bouncing through the air. Beside her, Noah Grayson wheeled up, a sketchpad balanced on his lap. He'd called her earlier, all excited. "Jess, I finished the drawing. You gotta see it." "Okay, Captain," she said, grinning as he flipped the pad open. "Show me the goods." It was her. Well, a pirate version of her. Big hat, eye patch, a sword in one hand, standing on a ship with waves crashing around. "That's you," Noah said, pointing. "Captain Jess. You fight the bad guys and win." Jess laughed, ruffling his hair. "Damn, kiddo, you've got skills. I look badass." "You are badass," he said, dead serious, and her chest tightened. She glanced at him, those big, earnest eyes, the way he smiled like she was the coolest thing he'd ever met. She'd spent years thinking nobody saw her, just another face slinging coffee at May's. But Noah did. And that hit harder than any paycheck. "So," he said, kicking his feet a little, "you gonna work with my dad now?" She leaned back, stretching her legs out, still thinking about it. "What's your vote?" "I think you should," he said, shrugging. He listens to you. Nobody else tells him when he's messed up. Jess chuckled, shaking her head. Yeah, well, somebody's got to keep him in line. Might as well be me. Noah's grin faded into something softer. I'm glad it's you, Jess. You're real. She swallowed, her throat suddenly thick. You too, buddy, she said, voice rough. They sat there a minute, watching the sun sink lower, painting the playground in warm light. A faint rainbow arched across the sky, left over from the storm, and Jess smiled to herself. She'd always figured kindness didn't get you anywhere. Just a pat on the back before the world moved on. But she'd been wrong. One soggy night, one kid in a wheelchair, and here she was. Back at Grayson Tech, Victor stood in his office, staring out at the city. The skyline glittered, all sharp edges and ambition, but his mind was elsewhere. He'd built this empire on strategy, on never blinking first. Trust wasn't part of the equation, not after years of backroom deals and smiling sharks, but Jess Harper had cracked that open. And not just because she'd saved his ass from Miles. It was Noah, how she'd seen him, not as the billionaire's kid or the boy in the chair, but as Noah. Victor hadn't let himself feel that kind of raw, unguarded care in a long time. Too long. His phone buzzed. Lydia, with an update on the cleanup from the leak. Sir, the board's asking for a statement. What do you want to say? Tell him we're fixing it, he said, his voice steady. And get me a meeting with the staff, all of them, not just the top dogs. Things are changing. Lydia didn't miss a beat. Understood, sir. She hung up and Victor turned back to the window. He didn't know if Jess would stay, but he hoped she would. For the company, sure, but mostly for him. And for Noah. A week later, Jess walked into Grayson Tech with her head high, the towel she'd given Noah that first night tucked in her bag. A quiet reminder of where this all started. She'd taken Victor's offer, but on her terms. A real voice, a real shot at making this place less of a machine and more of a team. The suit still stared, but she didn't care. She'd earned her spot, and they'd figure that out soon enough. She met Noah at the park again that weekend, the air crisp with fall. He handed her another drawing. This time it was her and him, side by side on the ship, sailing under that rainbow. We're a crew now, he said, grinning. Damn right we are, Jess replied, slinging an arm around him. They watched the kids play, the sun warm on their faces, and for the first time in forever, Jess felt like she was right where she belonged. Life had a funny way of flipping the script. One small act, one rainy night, and everything changed. Kindness wasn't a dead end. Sometimes it was the start of something bigger than you'd ever dreamed. And as the sun dipped below the trees, Jess whispered to herself, "Guess I was wrong about a lot of things." She smiled. So was Victor, but they'd figure it out together. Wow, what a ride, right? Jess and Noah found their place, and Victor learned a thing or two. How'd this story hit you? Subscribe now and drop a comment with your favorite moment. We've got more heart tuggers coming your way, so stick with us.